Welcome to the Intuitive Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Rafferty, medical doctor, PhD, Reiki, and shamanic intuitive healer. I'm here to bring you on a journey of holistic healing that explores the science of the physical body, combined with mental and emotional well-being, energetic and spiritual health. And I am so excited to have you gorgeous souls here with me for another week exploring our magic. So 2 weeks ago, when we went on a journey with the pod, we went into a beautiful, beautiful area with regard to remembering that we are magical souls walking this earth and that we bring a light and a vibration and a frequency that literally helps to transform this planet. And this week, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into recognizing your magic and basically identifying how we communicate with spirit, because on the day-to-day we go around and we might feel like we're perfectly ordinary in this physical world, but you could have these beautiful extensions of your natural sensory system that you perceive to be normal for you, but they actually could be really lovely ways in which spirit is trying to communicate with you. But perhaps you just haven't put words to these experiences before. And I just want to run through what we call the Clair Senses, which is essentially all of these different intuitive extensions of our already sensory system. And essentially, it's how spirit communicates with us through those senses. And I want to help you recognize what each of them are, potentially help you to identify what your dominant Clair senses are, and give you some tips and tools to actually develop them. So this podcast idea kind of came through over the last 8 weeks during the chakra healing course that Becky and I have been running online and in person. And we had the most beautiful group with us on this journey. And it has been so incredibly powerful. The shamanic work never ceases to amaze me. And I really, really love combining kind of shadow and light as we explore ourselves and go on a deeper energetic journey with ourselves. And as we learn to communicate with spirit and our ancestors and our guides and all of these things, it's so important to explore the light and the shadow of it all. And that's essentially what we were doing over the last 8 weeks. But what was really interesting to me and what was a lovely reminder was some of the beautiful emails and the one-to-one sessions that I've been doing after a half-day healing retreat that we did as part of the course. So during that half-day retreat, essentially we did deep meditative channeled journeys through which I communicated what spirit wanted us to do. And we met our ancestors and we did some journaling and we did some breath work. And it was just a beautiful experience. But what was really interesting to me afterwards when I was catching up with people was how people experienced the half-day retreat, experienced the messages that came through from spirit or their loved one or their guides. And I thought to myself, this is fascinating because, you know, I really want to record a pod on this to help people recognize that there's different ways in which we perceive spirit to communicate with us. And essentially that there's no right way. Everybody is so unique and everybody connects with spirit differently, you know? And our intuition, it's almost like a personal language that we have between us and spirit. And the way that you receive messages is just as unique as a fingerprint. You know, so the way that you connect and you receive messages and you go on a journey with all of this beautiful light that wants to communicate with you is so utterly unique. So it's so important when we are on this path to let go of comparison to how other people may be experiencing something, and to let go of expectation, because expectation is one of the biggest killers of our connection with spirit. So comparison, expectation, pop them out the door, pop them out the window, because they are not going to be coming with you on this journey. And I've recorded some pods specifically about this to help you navigate that shadow if that's somewhere that you go. So check back through the previous episodes. Now, what I would really love for everybody to kind of sit with is an open heart as we explore some of this stuff, and trust that your subtle sensations that come through, even hearing some of this information, and some of the impressions that you feel when you hear some of these things, even though they might seem small, these are all little intuitive nudges that are telling you you're on the right path, and that potentially one thing may resonate with you because actually that's part of how you communicate with spirit. So remember, there are many, many ways in which we can honor our unique connection with spirit. And as we kind of recognize how we can do that, this communication channel becomes clearer, because actually we're channeling our energy into exploring it and expanding it, you know? So essentially, that's where I want to go with today's episode. So, what are the Clair senses? So, the word Clair comes from the French word clear. And the Clair senses are essentially clear, intuitive senses. They're extensions of our physical senses that allow us to perceive the subtle and energetic world that exists around us. So, just like you see with your eyes or hear with your ears, your intuitive senses allow you to see, hear, feel, know, smell, or taste messages from spirit, which is super cool. And I'm going to go into each one of them as we go through this pod. Now, everybody has access to these, though some may be more developed or natural for individuals compared to others. But all of us can essentially strengthen our connection to these different perceptions and awarenesses. And it's important to recognize which ones you feel more connected to, so you can really lean into those, and then go on a bit of a journey to kind of challenge yourself to explore and develop the other essences or the other senses that exist. So essentially, I just want to really highlight that, you know, the Clair senses are extensions of our 5 physical senses, plus an additional one that represents pure intuitive knowing. So essentially, we have 5 senses and we have an additional Clair sense. So the 6 Clair senses that we're going to go on a journey with today are clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, clairaudience, which is clear hearing, clairsentience, which is clear feeling, clairaudience, which is clear smelling, clairgustance, which is clear tasting, and claircognizance. Now, this is the additional intuitive sense that isn't necessarily an extension of a physical sense, but claircognizance actually represents clear knowing. And this basically connects us to directly to divine or higher wisdom beyond logic or sensory experience. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail now with regard to each of these different and amazing ways to connect with spirit. And I'd love for you, as we go on this journey, to sit with yourself and go, actually, yeah, you know, I do have a really good sense of X or a sense of why, and really lean into kind of identifying which of these senses is strongest for you. And as we go through, I'll just give you little examples as to kind of what has become a strong part of my healing practice, and things that don't necessarily come through strongly for me. So everybody's going to be different. So some people will be able to access all of these senses because they deeply try to develop all of them, whereas others may connect more strongly with one. So let's get stuck into it and explore what each of them are. So essentially, let's start with clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. And this is the ability to see through your mind's eye, your third eye. And sometimes what we call this in shamanic terms is lucid dreaming. And sometimes it almost feels like you're dreaming while you're awake. So when I'm sitting in my client sessions, when people are speaking, I see visual images like it was a dream in my mind's eye. It literally is like in my third eye. Now, sometimes I have to kind of bring my sense of awareness to a space that's beyond the physical reality of what I'm seeing with my human eyes. And it might sound a little complicated, but actually, it kind of happens. Naturally and intuitively in my sessions. Have you ever been sitting with anybody and you get flashes or images to past life situations or memories with this person, or you can kind of see how something is playing out as someone is telling you it? Like, that's all connection to your deeper sense of clairvoyance. So you might receive messages through visions, through images, through colors, or even symbolic pictures in meditations or dreams as well. So it's not necessarily just when you're sitting in conversation with people. It can be deep in meditation or in the dream world. And this is really quite fascinating. And this is why I love my mantra practice with my mala beads in the morning, because I call in the energies of higher beings when I'm doing my mantra practice. And the vibration and the frequency that they hold communicates different messages in my mind's eye that I can see. So, for example, when I went through a period when I had COVID one time where I just sat and I meditated for basically a week. And as the week on and I meditated more and more and I was doing a lot of my mantra practice, I was connecting a lot with the god Lord Shiva. And I was asking for guidance, I was asking for intuition, and I was asking for a really clear path to destroy everything in my way that was kind of preventing me from stepping into my really authentic and truest nature. And I started seeing in my mind's eye, when I was deep in meditation and in deep mantra practice with Lord Shiva, the vision of a white building, and almost looked like a small white house that had lots of wildflowers outside. And I basically could see in my mind's eye the name of a cafe that I was told to go to, essentially. When I went down to that cafe, I was like, I have no idea why I'm here, but it must be related to a house of some sort. And I said, do you have any rental properties up, or do you have any notifications about where I might be able to find more information on housing? And the person who ran the cafe said to me, no, but you should go and visit such and such a place around the corner. So I followed the signs from the universe and I went around and I asked them, do you have any property availability? And they said, well, funnily enough, we've just had this property become available this morning. And they showed me a picture of it, and it was a white house with wildflowers out the front. So I said, oh my God, I'm getting tingles as I'm even telling this story. I said, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to follow this further. So they brought me around 45 minutes to show me the white house that I had seen in my deep meditative visions. And as soon as I opened the door, it was just magic. I just got this sense that I needed to rent this property, which ultimately became my practice. And that is where I do my one-to-one sessions now. So, I think when we create space to sit in meditation and to actually connect in with our deeper vision, we can receive some really beautiful messages from spirit when we're connecting with this lovely sense of clairvoyance. So, if you have a really vivid imagination, if you've very detailed dreams, if you get flashes of imagery when someone speaks, you're probably using clairvoyance already. So I would encourage you to really lean into that. And, ways that you can really work with this in a really playful way is, do visualization meditations. So this is part of the coursework that I usually bring people on to try and develop this skill within people. I do a lot of visualization practice in my meditations. I bring people on deeply visual journeys. And, practicing visualization can be a lovely way of developing your clairvoyance. You can also do a lot of work around your third eye chakra to make sure that it's cleared and that you're harnessing as high a vibrational energy in that space as possible. And another lovely way of going on a journey with this is to keep a dream journal. So when you wake up, have it beside your bed, spend a couple of minutes journaling about all of the dreams that you had, and maybe doing a little bit of research online about the messages that come through. Because if I get a dream, I dream most nights and they're usually crazy and vivid and amazing, but I tend to say to people, they are all messages from spirit. We're taken away. Our soul is taken to all these higher planes of learning when we're asleep. And a lot of the time, I used to feel like I had all these gobbledygook dreams that were just parts of memories from the day. But now I realize every single little dream was trying to communicate something to me. So I don't look at anything as a coincidence necessarily anymore. I think life is a beautiful tapestry of synchronicities and learnings and teachings. And when we lean into actually sitting with some of this stuff, we can learn so much about our senses, our Clair senses, and we can also begin to really pay attention to the messages and the ways in which spirit wants to communicate with us. Also, spend time noticing shapes or light or colors in nature. How do you actually see the world with your human eyes? And can you even soften your gaze when you're in some of these beautiful places that have a lovely vibration or frequency? And just rest the eyes and see what comes through when you begin to try and see just behind the eyelids. And the more that you allow yourself to actually see, the more spirit will actually show you. So that is clairvoyance. So let's move on now to clairaudience, and this is clear hearing. And essentially, this is when guidance comes through sound, and that could be an inner voice that comes through. It could be a really powerful song lyric that speaks to you. It could be a phrase that keeps repeating in your mind, in your head, or even tones ringing in your ears. Now, I find this fascinating because there was one particular energetic upgrade that I went through. It was this deep surge of awakening that occurred within me, and I started to get really loud ringing in my ears, and I thought I was going mad. But essentially, I now have a ringing in my ears at all times. And on the right side, particularly, this is where I receive a lot of my messages from spirit, is through the right ear. When I am in very high vibrational frequency energy, when I'm receiving messages from my guides or spirit, the sound of the ringing intensifies, that it becomes so loud sometimes if the frequency or the vibration of the energy I'm within is very high. So I do love when people come through to me, and in medicine we call it tinnitus or tinnitus. I tend to say to people, well, if people are coming through with a ringing in their ears, I was like, what's the deeper spiritual meaning here? Are we pay attention to the messages that are coming through from spirit? Now, this ringing in my ears, it isn't something that distracts me on the day to day, because I know it's a message in which I'm kind of I can perceive how intense an energy is in my environment. So, generally speaking, it's really important to kind of recognize that if we're hearing words internally, or even externally in our environment, or even subtle sound cues, it's important to kind of recognize, are these mental chatter, or are they actually messages from spirit? And this is why it's so important to be able to find quiet time to discern what type of words you're hearing. Because I have to tell you, this has been one of the hardest senses for me to actually develop, because I have a very strong inner critic that speaks very loudly and very harshly. And it has taken a long time and a lot of journey within me to cultivate a lot of self-love and to really quiet and calm that voice. And I spend a lot of time meditating. I spend an hour every day doing my mantra practice and meditating in order to be able to create silence so that you can attune yourself to the inner hearing that's within you. Silence is needed. So when we sit and we meditate and we can clear out all of the clutter, and this can be really hard. Don't get me wrong. When I first started trying to meditate, it took me like months and months to sit for longer than 2 or 3 minutes without squirming off the seat. And what I tend to say to people, if you are one of those souls, it's probably because you need it more. You need the time to be able to find a way to sit with yourself. So it's really interesting because usually when I hear voices from spirit, it could just be a word or a phrase. It just lands in there. I hear it, and it's usually soft in tone. Whereas the inner critic, the voice that I hear sometimes that comes through, that is the mental chatter, that tends to be a bit louder, a little bit harsher. But it's important to identify and be able to distinguish between these two things that are going on internally if you're trying to develop your clairaudience. So, like I say, to develop this sense, spend time in silence, attune to your inner hearing, the inner sounds, the inner words. And, because some people are really gifted when it comes to the clairaudience, they can really go deep with things like sound bowls, sounds that have certain vibrational frequencies, mantra practice where it's like a repeated vibration, a frequency, a sound that they go on a journey with. Even nature sounds can be brilliant for people, and start listening beyond words. Feel the vibration of sound itself. Sometimes when I look at people that are playing classical music and they're actually playing it and they're crying, and I just think, oh my God, they're so attuned to the vibration and the frequency, the emotional energy that comes through in what they are hearing. That is spirit. So, just a reminder, Spirit's voice is gentle. It's often the whisper beneath your own thoughts. And that's so important when we're going on a journey of clairaudience and finding the tools that help you to hear the vibration and the frequency and the sound beneath the deeper meaning of everything. Now we're going to go on a journey of clairsentience. And this is clear feeling. And it's one of the most common clair senses and shows up as physical or emotional sensations that carry intuitive meaning. Now, this is really where a lot of my clair senses kicked off with clairsentience. And it's how I actually work in my practice. This is one of my most precious spiritual gifts that I absolutely adore, because when people sit with me across from me in session, I've opened sacred space, I open up my energy field, I begin to feel in my body where the emotions are trapped in their body, where there's trapped energy. I feel deeply the emotional energy that they're holding. And some people on this journey, like they go to see healers because they want the healer to shed light on what's happening in their body, in their mind, and their emotion to help guide them. And sometimes we've lived a life in which we've shut down a lot of these things. So to sit in the presence of someone that can actually feel it for you and help to guide you, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience, and it's a wonderful thing, you know? But it's just about bringing your awareness to the energy in your body. And like I say, emotions are energy in motion. It's energy that wants to move. So clairsentience is like this deep feeling and connection to either your emotive energy or someone else's emotive energy. Do you get chills when truth is spoken, when someone stands in their authentic light? I get spirit tingles, I call them. I get tingles across my crown chakra and down my back. So, but they could be chills for you. A lot of empaths and healers often have very strong clairsentience. And usually part of a soul journey for these beautiful empaths and healers tends to be that they grew up in an environment with potentially a very overwhelming caregiver, or in a circumstance in which their emotional body, it almost became suppressed, or there was a deep sense of suppression within the family because they felt things so deeply. They needed to actually shut down their connection to that to survive. So if you're on this journey and you're beginning to realize, actually, I'm deeply empathic, I have a deep sense of other people's feelings and emotions. I feel things in my body when I'm around people. That is your connection to your clairsentience. And I have to tell you, it is an absolutely precious gift. And if we could all deeply attune to each other's emotions and become empaths, the world would be such a different space because we'd have a deeper understanding of what other people are going through. So this is a really, really lovely Claire gift, and I encourage you, if you're empathic, if you're drawn towards that healing nature, to begin to really pay attention to it. The only thing is with this gift, it can become overwhelming if you're taking on that feeling every day. So when I first started doing this work, I was doing a lot of gut-centered work. There were people coming through to me with bowel cancer and inflammatory bowel disease. And, it was really quite interesting because after my sessions, my bowels actually felt inflamed. I used to get really crazy bowel disturbance because my bowel was clearing the energy of what I was helping the person in session to heal. And I really want to highlight that if you are an empath or a healer, grounding practices are going to be so important for you. Energy hygiene is going to be so important for you because it's important to recognize that if you're feeling it, it needs to be cleared from your energy field. So practice grounding, get yourself out into nature, connect with your body. Things like breath work can help to move emotion in the body, and learn where different sensations show up for you and how they show up for you. Maybe it's tightness, maybe it's warmth, maybe it's expansion. So when I'm sitting with a client, I can kind of tell the different, it's almost like there's an elemental energy to it. Sometimes it feels watery or damp. Sometimes it feels hot, or there's heat there, or I see it as fire. And, as you lean into kind of going on a journey with your clairsentience, you can develop this ability to actually go deeper into someone's energy and kind of perceive the different layers of or textures of what that emotion actually holds. It's really quite fabulous. So like I say, Becky and I have created a energy hygiene module as part of our energy medicine course, and we will continue to expand on this because it's so important for people to know how to be hygienic with their energy. We have clips up on our YouTube channel, which are obviously free to access, but they give you some tools there on how to cleanse your energy field. Do this regularly so that you can really distinguish between what's yours and what's not. And the reason that I say that is, like what I was experiencing when I first started doing a lot of this healing work, or even when I leave the practice, if there's some sticky energy in me, it will crave sugar, it will crave Chinese, it will crave a pizza. And I know that that's not my energy. So, now I know. Now I know what's my energy and what's someone else's that I'm carrying. So, just to finish out the clairsentience piece, your body is a sacred compass and it feels what your mind cannot necessarily yet name. So, it's important to feel and let feeling be your guide. Let your clairsentience be your guide. Now, I'm going to speak next about clairaudience, which is clear smelling. And this is the ability to smell scents that have no physical source. And I find this fascinating. This isn't something that I connect with, to be honest with you. It happens on very rare occasion, or when I am doing group healing with other people that have this sense. And this is what's fascinating about doing Reiki shares or group work with other healers. When everybody opens up their energy and we're within an energetic bubble that people are sharing their gifts, we can actually see and perceive other Clair senses because other people have given us access to that through their vibration and their frequency. And the reason that I talk about this is because obviously when people come through to me as a healer, sometimes when I put my hands on them and I'm doing a journey with them or I'm bringing them on a visual meditation, they'll be like, oh my God, I can never see anything, but I can when I'm with you. And that's because I've opened up that capacity or that frequency or that vibration within you. Now, that first experience of me being able to kind of tune into Clairaudience was when I was with one of my dearest and most beautiful friends who has this Clair sense. And we used to do a lot of healing work on her beautiful partner. So we'd get together. Oh, it was such a beautiful witchy vibe. We'd get together every week and we'd all do group healing together. This was in my some of my earliest days as a healer. And these two souls taught me so much about how to kind of lean into these gifts. And they gave me great confidence while I worked with them. And, you know, all of us evolved spiritually and energetically doing these weekly sessions together. But my friend has this beautiful Clair sense or the Clairaudience, and she can smell things. And it is fascinating because when we are in healing together, I can start picking up scents through her ability to do it. And it's weird and wonderful. So, you know, how does this show up for you? Maybe suddenly you smell flowers or perfume or smoke or earth, you know, whatever that might be, when it is often linked to memories or loved ones that are in spirit. So, my gorgeous friend, when we do healing work together, she can actually smell spirits and she can smell energy. So we were doing some energy clearing one time, and she could smell some really deep, heavy, not very nice scents that were linked to someone that was in spirit. But similarly, she can smell fragrances or perfumes or flowers coming through from other spirits or loved ones. So it's really quite amazing. I find it really quite fascinating. Um, and sometimes these smells may be really subtle, but they're deeply meaningful in a lot of ways. So, the way that you can kind of develop this is to use scent very mindfully. So, essential oils, incense, herbs, all of these things, tune into the scent, you know. And when a scent arises for you, pause and ask, what does this remind me of? Can you start linking memories and people and places with scents? You know, honor the messages and the memories that come through when you actually smell things. It was funny. We were walking through the airport last week and we went through the fragrance section, and literally it was like every year of my teenage my teenage life came back to me in various different fragrances of Hugo Boss. And it was actually quite wild, and Izzy Miyake. So yeah, but it was beautiful because actually each scent connected me back to a different time in life, you know? So, spirit can often use scent to awaken remembrance and connection within us. Sometimes that's parts of us that needed to be healed or seen, you know? So, that's a really beautiful and amazing Clair sense. Now, the fifth one that I want to talk about is clairgustance, and that's clear tasting. So when you experience taste that isn't physically there. Now, I haven't met many people that connect into this, but some people carry some beautiful memories of this from past lives as well. It's really quite powerful, and I love hearing more about it, you know? So it may be that certain experiences of taste connect you to memories, people, or they have symbolic meanings in some ways. So, for example, tasting honey to someone might represent sweetness returning into their life. or a loved one who's always baked specific things with certain flavors. So, it's lovely to be able to connect in with that. And I know some amazing foodies in my life who don't realize they're connecting with Claire Gustins, but they are. When they taste every little bit, it reminds me of their grandmother's kitchen. Or maybe there's memories from ancestors that are coming down through the family lineage that used very particular recipes when they were cooking. For people to develop this, I recommend practicing mindful eating, tuning into subtle flavors, and paying attention to the symbolic meaning of tastes whenever they symbolically or spontaneously appear to you. And like I say, this is one of the rarer senses, but when it happens, it's a lovely, very powerful and personal way of connecting with spirit. Now, finally, I want to talk about the beautiful, intuitive sense of clear knowing, and that's claircognizance. So, claircognizance is this beautiful awareness, just awareness that you just know something without knowing it. And it can arrive as an instant insight, a sudden clarity, or just a direct download of something that's truthful. And it might feel for some people like this inner conviction that it's like yes or a no, and that's absolute. That just feels right to you. And if you're highly analytical, or intuitive, or often say, I just know these things, this is one of your strengths. So I really love this. And this is a beautiful Clair sense that I work with in practice. So I tend to, this would probably be one of my stronger senses. And when I'm working with people, I'm feeling into the energy. I'm looking through their energy body. I'm feeling it in my energy body. And then sometimes I just get a clear knowing that something is the case. And this has been one of the trickiest things to actually develop for me, because you have to lean into a deep sense of trust. Because you have to trust that what you are feeling and the messages that are coming through are accurate and they're true, and you have to just trust and say it. So like I say, when I did a lot of my earlier work, I worked with two beautiful souls that I am soul connected with, that came here to help me evolve as a healer. We all helped each other evolve, but geez, I'm forever grateful to the work that they did with me. But it was a very, very safe space to just start speaking intuitively and to really allow myself to go into that energy of claircognizance, to just be like, I'm feeling like this is the case. I'm feeling like your granny is here. I'm feeling like she wears red lipstick. Why is she showing me a daffodil? And just saying it, and just saying what intuitively comes through as a clear sense of knowing. Now, that's the combination, what I'm speaking about there, of the vision and the claircognizance. Some people will just sit with this sense of just knowing things. And there was one beautiful soul on my last retreat who said to me, I didn't see much, Tony. But, and I said, well, what did you take away from the event? And they said, just a knowing that I was special and I love myself. And I said, that is claircognizance. That is the gift that you hold. But sometimes, because we don't have terms or words to describe what you experienced, we don't know that that was a spiritual truth that you learned during that healing experience. So it is really, really, it's a beautiful and gorgeous gift to be able to channel into. But it does take a lot of trust, trusting the process, trusting that these spontaneous ideas that come through, these creative flashes, these decisions that are coming through you, that they're claircognizance, they're ways in which spirit is communicating and speaking to you. Generally speaking, what I tend to say to develop this is to practice your trust in these spontaneous ideas and creative insights and decisions that you're being brought on a journey with. And I really think that journaling is a beautiful way to actually go on a journey with claircognizance, to sit and actually journal about your intuitive hits. Write them down beforehand, write down what you're feeling, and then get curious about it and begin to trust the process. And then you can reflect back and see which ones were truth. Write them down so that you have proof that actually these beautiful intuitive hits were on the money. And I would also love to encourage you to lean into noticing how your body feels when you just know something is right. At those times when you have an intuitive sense and something is proven to be right, feel it in your body. Feel it in your body so you become familiar about how your body feels when you get that deep intuitive knowing that something is the way it is. Okay? So the more that you trust this knowing, the more that spirit will speak to you through that sense of knowing. So that is it, my loves. That is the journey through the 6 Clair senses. I am so excited, and I hope that you've been able to kind of identify, actually, that's a little bit how I work on the day to day. Or maybe you've heard something today that's resonated with you, and you're going to start exploring that a little bit more deeply. And I am so here for that. I am absolutely so here for that, because you are inherently intuitive. You are absolutely inherently intuitive, and you can connect with these gifts. You are already connected to these gifts. These are not something that needs to be earned. They're something that we actually remember. Because they exist within you. And like I say, some people are going to have more dominant or stronger Clair senses, but we can lean further into those once we recognize which ones are stronger or dominant senses. And we can also cultivate the others. So the more that you honor your natural way of connecting with spirit, the more that your magic will unfold. And this all started for me back in my early teens when I started meditating. And these things evolved over many years for me. So it's more about remembering and trusting and getting curious and allowing yourself to remember your magic. So today, as we're finishing up, as you move through your world, stay super curious. Notice the feelings and the whispers and the knowing that comes through you. And just trust that that is spirit speaking through all of it, through all of your senses and your wisdom and your knowing and your knowledge. So I would love for you today, as you sit here, to just affirm to yourself that you trust the different ways that spirit speaks uniquely to you, and that you are open, you are grounded, and you are connected to the divine guidance that's coming through for you. So, as always, my loves, keep walking this path of remembrance, trusting in your magic, trusting in the light that you have. And until we meet again in another 2 weeks, stay in your magic, stay in your light, and stay in your truth. With love from my heart to yours, it's Dr. Anthony.